welcome back to PA Chalk Up. I'm your host Manny, and today we have Ryan Croson, who, by the way, was episode 3 of this podcast. So appreciate you for coming back. And we've kind of already done a mini podcast before this, catching up.
True.
But if you let us know who you are, what you do, and how you got to where you are. Have you ever wondered how I'm able to run my business, my podcast, and still be able to coach? Well, I use TeamBuildr. TeamBuildr is an all-in-one coaching software that reduces the amount of time that we spend on the back end of programming, on our Google Sheets, on our Excels, and allows me more freedom to do testing. With this podcast and episodes, I'm actually able to run some programs that I learned through different coaches coming on. To find out how you can use TeamBuildr and how it can apply to your own program, visit the link in the description and catch yourself a 30-day free trial. Just simply use code PACHALKUP, that's PACHALQUP, and start the next stage of your coaching career.
So I'm Ryan Croson. I know Manny from working at the University of Washington for a couple years in their strength and conditioning department, specifically the football team. I was with the team from January 4th, 2022 through May 31st, 2024. Kind of coaching change happened. That whole DeBoer staff, they're kind of at Alabama now. Fish came in. I was able to kind of stay through transition, but, they have their own way of how they want to structure all their, kind of their staff. So I ended up getting the boot. That's okay. Was unemployed there for a little bit. I actually ended up working in the HVAC industry with my fiance's father. So I was kind of a field hand for him for a couple months there. And then I got hired on here at Pro Club, which is a private gym in the Bellevue, Redmond area in September of 2024. So I've been in personal training here ever since.
He's also being a little bit modest. He also does coach track and does some of that on the side as well.
Oh,
Unless you're not allowed
yes.
to talk about that, then I will cut this out.
No, I am. So high school track coach at Bothell High School. First day was actually yesterday. So my brain's a little kind of fried right now. I've been having really long days. But track season has officially started.
Which I still say that I'm faster than you. Every chance that I have.
Well, if you get married before me, not only will you get marriage strength, but you get marriage speed. So if you end up
No.
tying the knot before Maddie and I do, then yes, I will gladly, humbly bow to you.
So we also did get engaged a couple of days in between each other. Like I always say, like we are locked in for life, Ryan.
Touche, brother.
But no, we were kind of talking offline, and I kind of want to get into some of it, and it's meeting people where they're at. Sorry, and it's again me and Tree, who you also know. We've had this discussion based on some psychology stuff I was looking at, and it's like it's thinking of us as having this dimmer, right? And we kind of need to match that level to the person that's coming in and see how we can either elevate it or diminish it a little bit if like they're coming in too hot and too high. Like let's bring it down a little bit. Let's make sure we have these performances and then go from there. But it's kind of like having these backup plans, an extra thing in place in case the plan A doesn't work. Then you've got like plan B to Z in place.
Yes.
So how have you sort of implemented that within your collegiate experience to now PT and some of your track stuff?
Yeah. Well, I guess that to kind of start off answering that, I guess that would be the biggest difference between kind of team or group oriented training or working out versus like true individualization, right? Is when you have a team, no matter how big the team is, 100 people, 50 people, or even a class, 15 people, 40 people, they're all kind of going through the same thing, right? And we can talk about, like how you want to divide your class, your template, whatever it is, like lower body push, upper body pull, but everyone's doing the same thing. And we kind of what we were talking about earlier, right? Some people are going to be stronger in some areas than another. So they might really excel and really like one type of motion and not the other one. So what the biggest thing that I've had to kind of switch mentally is instead of being so rigid with my programming of this is the workout, we're doing the workout we need to do hard things to get better, is kind of having a progression and a regression per movement pattern and meeting people where they're at loosely within this template. Because at least the way that it works here is people, they always buy training packages and they'll
Mm,
sign up for 2 days a week or 3 days a week. So, kind of the first thing that I had to do coming in is I'm like, all right, shoot, well, if people are signing up for full body strength training, right, we know there's like 7 or 8, depending on your education and your background, 7 or 8 exercise movements or patterns that we need to get done to kind of target every single muscle group and challenge the full body. How do I meet them where they're at per pattern,
mm,
right? And I think the example we brought up earlier was just a lot of my clientele. They're in tech, so they have a tech job where they're sitting at a desk, they're kind of hunched over all day. They tend to struggle with the upper body push pattern, right? But they pick up and they can progress really quickly a lower body push pattern. So, kind of, I guess my biggest challenge was how do I go about meeting them where they're at, and what, I guess, for lack of a better term, KPIs or key
mhm,
performance indicators do I feel like they need to meet before I move them up a level per pattern. And then based on their individual goals, right? Like if I get a guy who, for example, let's say, he was all state in high school, like 3-time letter winner, and then he went and like got big in the tech industry, kind of feel like he lost his body a little bit, and he loves upper body push. How do
mm,
I be fluid with my templates to kind of tailor to that, while also making sure we're getting everything done that we need to get done, while meeting him on the levels that he's at for all these movements? So, kind of just filtering and thinking through that lens versus this is the template, this is the
mm.
workout, this is what you got to do. And again, like, not being as rigid with my programming has like probably been the biggest thing that
Mhm.
I've had to kind of actively learn throughout these past couple
Yeah.
months.
Again, this was sort of brought up because I've been doing a little bit of research and work with the LTAD model, so the long term athletic development. And essentially, there's this level system where level one is basic, obviously,
Yep.
hinge, knee, squat patterns, push pulls, vertical, horizontals. And depending on where the athlete lands is the level that they're at throughout. Even if they have a stronger upper body or a stronger upper body, they'll be within that level throughout. And like there's different tests that goes on through in between them as well. So it's kind of like I think that's a little bit trickier when we talk about the testing system because then you'd be like doing a test 5 but a lower body test 2,
Mm-hmm.
and I can see how the water gets murky there,
Mm-hmm.
but that's going off the basis that there's this system. But if you strip it back and look at, okay, do I need this test? What is this test telling me? Like I
Yep.
can look into the programs and be like, oh, actually, he's moving a lot better. It's moving with
Mm-hmm.
these. I can up the weight a little bit, or I
Yeah.
can adapt this movement to a higher difficulty. I can
Yep.
progress it. I can regress it. So it's sort of taking these basic fundamentals and being like, am I tracing true performance if I'm keeping him or her at the same level throughout? In one way, yes, but in other areas, they're staying stagnant until we get to
Mm-hmm.
that level that they require for that specific body part. And again, KPIs is always a good thing. Like with, and I touched on a little bit, the flexible nonlinear periodization, you kind of have to test prior to the session to see where they
Mm-hmm.
are. So, like either a jump or a VBT type test or
Mm-hmm.
whatever is specific for that session. So, if like, and again, I've just had this conversation, but if I'm testing movement speed, as in like velocity type movements, like if I'm
Mm-hmm.
wanting a fast session to happen, I'm going to get them to jump because that's a true representation of uh, velocity, right? But if
Mm-hmm.
I'm moving them in a way that I need strength to be the factor, I'm probably going to chuck the VBT and have a certain weight as a tester and be like, this is the base. If you fall over or under, that determines how hard we're pushing that session. So it's again, it's finding how we can specify the tests for what the athletes or the clients are needing for that session.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's
And
awesome.
again,
Oh, go for it.
yeah, you good?
It's funny you mentioned speed in VBT, right? And that's not something that's very prevalent with a kind of a gen population.
Hmm.
But at least like for me, just like eye test,
Yep.
that is probably my biggest KPI is if I think they look locked in, they look smooth, they look in control, then
Hmm.
we'll either progress weight or we'll progress movement complexity, right? Moving up from level 2 to level 3. But another one is speed. It's kind of just it's something that I kind of didn't know that I take into high account when I'm watching, like when I'm watching and training my people. But if they're moving weight faster with
Hmm.
progressive sets, that's now an indicator to me of like, hey, just so you know, you're going to do a heavier weight this next set, but I want it to
Hmm.
look like the set before. Or like, hey, when I write this next phase, bump them up a level, see how they look. Because speed is often a product of the skill at hand,
Hmm.
right? If you can, or speed's a product of coordination, and coordination is a product of patterning that skill, right? So if we pattern that skill enough and they get good and coordinated at it, then they're going to be able to move that faster or smoother, what like with whatever that movement is. For example, I just progressed one of my clients from a half kneeling single dumbbell shoulder press to a landmine
Hmm.
because towards the end of our 3 week block on the half kneeling shoulder press, she had gone up in weight progressively every single week, and B, the heavier weight looked like it was lightweight speed wise, like on her vertical push. I'm like, cool, let's move to a landmine. Well, turns out I didn't know this till we got there. She does it faster on the landmine. So now I'm kind of playing that game in my head of okay, like how much weight do we want to chase on
Hmm.
landmine before we move to something else? Before we maybe increase the complexity, maybe we take her off of her knees and we get her on her feet to kind of take away some of that ground stability there that we can provide by having a split stance. So that's kind of those are the questions that I kind of have to wrestle with kind of daily
Hmm.
at this point. But it's a fun challenge.
And it's what we were talking about before as well. Is like it's always either critically analyzing your programs and or playing devil's advocate with yourself. Like
Yeah.
I think that's one of the best tools, and we obviously have spent some time with Kurt Van
Mm-hmm.
Wink, and within the first couple sessions, or like even seconds, we go into this full debate on um, genetics and how important those are in athletes, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that was just like he had just seen me. We got into like topics straight away, and it's like, okay, this is my view, this is my view, but like, where can we come in between and sort of talk about and agree? Not agree per se. We don't have to always agree, but we can at least understand where the person's coming from, right?
Yeah. Yep.
Like I think there's true value in questioning why you're doing something and then being able to back up as to why you've made that decision,
Mm-hmm.
right? I think again, me and you come from a similar system where we created programs and we got them torn apart, right? So that kind of teaches you to not attach yourself to a single program,
Mm-hmm.
because if someone comes after it and you get butt hurt, that's on
Yeah.
you, not on them. And second, it teaches you to be like, okay, I've put this in for this specific reason, and this is why I've made that decision.
Mm-hmm.
You're not just throwing shit at the wall and hoping it sticks.
Yes. Yeah. That's been a big piece here too, is granted, like I work with Gen Pop now outside of, just my athletes during track season, but I learned people love knowing the why.
Hmm.
People love, love, love knowing, okay,
Especially
like
tech people where they're coming from a analytical side.
yes, of course. So, and actually, kind of one thing that I always tie that back to is that MSS assessment that Greg Mack and Curtis have done a great job kind of building out. As I'm able to kind of tie the why back into that assessment and then blend it with the level that they're at per movement pattern. And for like, for example, the why might be as simple as you've told me you like doing this. We're going to do a lot of it.
Mm,
Or the why might be, well, I think we might be misaligned here, so we got to line this up before we get to, solve problem A before problem B. And then when problem A solves itself, or once we can get that kind of locked in, right, coordinated, smooth, maybe with a little bit of speed on the end, then we might be able to jump a level. But again, like
Hmm.
those are kind of the interesting questions that makes training so fun, is kind of what do you want to do? Where do you want to go? And how do you, this is the art and science of it, right? How do I blend their subjectivity of what they like to do, what they don't like to do, with the objectivity of, well, this is your 3 day a week template. How do I be fluid with that, blending what they like, what they don't like, what they need versus what they might not necessarily need? So
Mm.
that's been the coolest part, kind of going down this personal training journey here versus team training, where team training, right? It's, this is the program. Every kid's going to go through that program to a degree, and right, we're chasing a physiological adaptation for everybody. So that kind of, you don't really get the luxury of like, oh well, so and so has a shorter torso and longer arms, so they might really enjoy this movement, but they're going to hate this movement.
Mm.
I'm able to individually tailor that to what these, what my clients like here, which has been, like, again, by far the coolest and most challenging piece that keeps me on my toes. And if anything, I've also been able to grow my toolbox.
Yep.
Like, so often, like, kind of once you buy into a program, you write a program, right? You think that you're, at least it's really easy to get into that headspace of, this is the end all be all, this is the creme de la creme, everybody can benefit from this, which is true to a degree. But meeting people where they're at least in the PT world, has been kind of really eye opening and cool for me.
Yeah, and I think we are obviously talking about this off the recording, but the common phrases that we hear in this industry, there's many roads lead to Rome, and it's true. There's a lot of ways to get the same, or athletes to the same position or same place, but there is also nothing wrong with you having a map with the different roads. So if
Mm-hmm.
one is blocked, you can still chase another way to get your athletes there. And
Mm-hmm.
it's this notion of not being married to a system. Like,
Mm-hmm.
we are principle based, so we take all these great methodologies and we pick out what is needed for our athletes at that time. But if we try something and it doesn't work, we have a different way to still progress the athlete.
Mm-hmm.
Like you mentioned, speed and balance. Now, you can't have a high speed rate when balance is thrown in there,
Mm-hmm.
but we can slowly progress that.
Mm-hmm.
If we start on a buzu ball, right, and we're doing like rotation, like trunk rotations with a medicine ball, at
Mm-hmm.
first that's not going to be fast. It's
Nope.
not, because like the balance plays in, and the brain knows, like, if there's an element of balance and speed, I have to slow down one of those,
Yep.
right, or my body's going to break. So it's like chasing these slow stimuli first, and then building up to this higher
Mm-hmm.
velocity, higher thing. Like, by the end of a 12-week, 18-week program, you might be able to throw that ball to your coach or to your personal trainer or to whoever's in front of you. But at the start, you won't. You'll just be able to like rotate from one side to the other. And it's like
Yeah.
having these progressions and regressions that, again, I've always like, I've came from a Gen Pop background. I always
Mm-hmm.
say that you have the biggest learning curves when you're dealing with Gen Pop,
Mm-hmm.
because every day is a school day and you're going to get something different with everyone that walks in through the door.
Yes. Yes, for sure. Yeah, it's funny you mentioned that, right? So one thing, probably above all else, that I have had to be with Gen Pop specifically, compared to collegiate strength and conditioning specifically, is patience,
Hmm.
right? So if, we kind of all have these mental models in our head of what a med ball standing Bosu rotation is supposed to look like. And if it doesn't look like
Hmm.
that
Hmm.
the first couple
We freak out.
times, we freak out, tend to abandon it, tend to scrap it, right? Move on to something else, versus having the patience and the wherewithal, and giving your client information as to why
Mm.
they're doing this, right? I get asked that all the time, right? Why? Or how is this benefiting me? How is this going to help me? And again, oftentimes I'm able to tie that back into the MSS assessment, their subjective report of pain. But also, kind of like I said, it could be something as simple as, this is your goal. This is what's going to help you get there, right? And sometimes I've shown my clients, like my progression regressions per movement
Mhm.
pattern. I'm like, listen, if you want to get to a heavy bench press, we have to do a tall plank ISO first, because that tells me
Mhm.
that you can handle and coordinate your body weight effectively. Now, granted, right, there's some certain screens and some certain processes that we can do along the way to maybe skip levels. But I've also, again, this is just my background, my teaching. I tend to err on the side of caution.
Yep.
I'd rather have you really pass that eye test with flying colors before we move on to the next one than, again, kind of just throw a bunch of crap at the wall, see how it looks, take a mental note or two, and then push through, which has
Mhm.
definitely been kind of the background that we've come from in collegiate S&C. Again, it's this is the program. There's going to be movement patterns that kids are good and bad at, whether that tie into their anthropometrics or not, and you just get through it. Versus, no, 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 let's slow down, let's have some patience, let's understand the
Mhm.
why, like why what we're doing, and then be able to bridge that roadmap left or right when we need to.
And I think you've touched on it a couple times is the importance of coaching eye, and it's
Mm-hmm.
not something that you can just have. Like
Yeah.
you have to have reps. Like you have
Mm-hmm.
to physically do it multiple times a day, a year to be able to. And again, it's weird to explain because like we know what we're talking about. Like if, when we see a movement, we're like, "That's clean, like that's
Mm-hmm.
nice," or when we're like, "Oh, I don't
Mm-hmm.
know what's wrong with that, but there's something wrong with it."
Yes.
Um, I spoke with Coach AK. She's at LSU. She does volleyball and tennis, and she's very honest, and she will show the athletes the whole process, which is phenomenal to see. But there will be days in the weight room where she sees something wrong. She goes up to the athlete, is like, "I don't know what's wrong with that, but there is something wrong. On your next set, come get me because I want to look at it
Mm-hmm.
properly." And it's having that honesty and that humanity part and piece to be like, I don't know what's wrong with it, but I want it to be fixed. I need it to look a certain way. I don't know how or what or why, but
Mm-hmm.
just come and get me and I'll help.
Yeah, which kudos to her for doing that in a team setting. That's
Hmm.
not easy, right? Kind of, at least in our
She's a beast.
experiences, the only time where, at least in a team setting, where we've been able to truly slow down and get eyes on everybody doing the same thing are testing days, right?
Hmm.
It's either like you're coming in and we're testing you to try to get a baseline, or we're however many weeks down in the program, and again, you kind of slow down the workout, you trim the fat, you're only doing your meat and potatoes, and then we can kind of really slow down and look at what they're doing. I fortunately have the luxury of doing that every single day here with
Hmm.
every client that I work with. So my coaching eye has been receiving a lot of volume these past
Hmm.
couple months, but again, if anything, it's helped me, right? And
Yep.
then kind of I go back, and this is kind of my theme for 2025 is refine, right? I've been refining my refinement process to where, I'll go back and I'll look at my progression regression form, and I'll either switch some things around or take something out and put something else in, right? I mean, variety is the spice of life, but kind of always always changing those or updating those. And then same thing with
Hmm.
my track team. I kind of I made a reflection sheet that I fill out daily after practice. It takes me about 20 minutes, but I write down kind of in detail how was the weather, what was the kids' subjective report from the day before, what did they do the day before, how in my eyes how did it look the day before, and then how did it look today, and then
Hmm.
that very well might affect tomorrow. And then kind of going back to what we were talking about, with not being so rigid with programming, kind of a thing that I've switched to this year, living in the great state of Washington where our weather can change on a dime. I know I have a body of work that I would like to get done during the week, but now I'm flexible within my days. Obviously, trying not to break physiological principles as little as I
Hmm.
can, right? So, kind of, if we can stick to plan A, we're going to go plan A, but having a plan B and C, where if I'm pulling up to practice, my weather app said it's going to be 40 degrees and rain, and it turns out, like, hey, the rain passed earlier than we thought, it's warming up a little bit, let's do plan B. I think they can get more out of this, and physiologically that's going to make more sense versus, nope, you have to do this on this day. This is what we're doing because that's what science says. Well, life's not like that. And
Hmm.
also, writing things in rep ranges. One thing that's
Yep.
new, at least one thing that I didn't have when I was going through high school, was we have freshmen now. So the North Shore School District have moved ninth grade from the middle school to the high school. So when you talk about like a breadth of talent and skill, that just widened a ton for me this year because now freshmen are at the high school. So kind of writing things in rep range and pulling kids, right? Kind of having the confidence to just be like, hey, I know I wrote 5 to 10 reps. Your fifth rep didn't look great. You're done. Or move on to our next
Mm-hmm.
task, right? Kind of just in communicating that to them and saying, it's not because I hate you. It's not because I think you're bad. It's because I kind of have forward thinking of what we're going to do tomorrow, or again, the body of work. And I don't want to take away from that. Because if one rep too many today is going to put you in the hole for tomorrow, that's only going to build on itself all year. And listen, I run a really intense program. I got 12 weeks. I have
Hmm.
12 weeks to get you to run, specifically with my sprinters, as fast as you can to try to make a state qualifying time, or like to make one of the 16 spots at Kinko. So like yesterday, day one, we're running on the hill and we're going
Hmm.
fast day one. And it kind of, again, it's one of those things where I had to blend, okay, how much time do I have a year with the annual plan? What's important to me as a sprint coach? And you put them through a system, but there's variability in the system, right, per day. And I'm sure after this first week's done, I already kind of have a template for week 2, but I'm probably going to tweak some stuff.
Mm.
Again, just based on the eye test for this year. And then writing next year, I'll be able to take a closer look back at this year and the years before so that hopefully we can find a better launch point, a better start point.
Yeah.
And, I mean, that's how you kind of develop your philosophy.
Hmm. And I think one thing that I found really interesting about your self reflection after each day and the way that you're tying in sort of ABC programs is that you're adapting to the circumstances everywhere else. Like it's not just you rock up, this is what the session is. And again, you can't have that every single time. Sometimes you are going to have to back off a little bit because
Hmm.
kids are kids and they have other stresses in their life. And I
Yes.
think that's one of the biggest lessons I've learned recently is like no matter if it's physical stress or mental stress, it accumulates the same. So if
Yep.
I've got kids who have got tests or exams that week, I'm probably going to go right back to basics and just get them to move a little bit. Just even if it's just some activation type work.
Yep.
Let's get some movement. Let's get some, again, crawls, backward rolls, forward rolls, shrimping, like stuff that can also be fun. Like yeah, workout
Yeah.
can be fun. Like it's
Yeah.
not always having to push as hard as you can.
Yeah, which granted in with personal training specifically, I've had to do that as well. Like yes, I kind of write loose linear periodizations, but if they come in and they're like, "Oh my gosh, I had to take my kid to soccer and then I had a work meeting at 10 p.m. and they're working out here at 6 a.m." I'm like, we're going to tweak some stuff.
Mm,
We're going to slow it down. We're going to, again, maybe do a little more movement based stuff, take a little longer in our warm up, maybe cut some reps on the sets or just cut sets in general. So, again, like not being so rigid within the system because they're going to get a lot, potentially, they're going to get a lot more out of
mm,
4 sets of like 8 to 10 than 10 heavy sets of 3 today. Right.
yep.
So, kind of having a living, breathing program and meeting them where
Hmm.
they're at and being kind of, for lack of better terms, like an elite note taker.
Yep.
Gosh, I was so crappy at like kind of personal notes when I first started here, like as a personal trainer. I was like, oh, this is the program. We'll run people through it. It'll be good. But I would find myself tweaking things day of and not knowing why. So
Hmm.
again, during this whole like kind of theme of reflection, right, and kind of refining my refinement process, um, again, becoming an elite observer and note taker and writing down why I changed this. Like, oh, like terrible night's sleep
Hmm.
or like just got back from travel. Instead of just editing it, move on, here's the next one. and then kind of adjusting where you pick up then after that modified day, right?
Hmm.
So, yeah, just I guess all in all, like learning to be flexible, it's a skill that
Yep.
I've been working on every single day I've been working.
And it's hard because it's uncomfortable. It's uncomfortable being
Yeah.
like, because like when we're writing programs, there's an element of attachment in it,
Mm-hmm.
right? It's inherent. Like everyone does it. Like we write a
Mm-hmm.
program and we're like, I'm fucking proud of that. That's a sick program.
Yeah.
But then to go on the day and then you're like, oh, actually, this is terrible for today. So I'm going to change it in a way that is no longer the program I wrote, but it's getting that client through that session because that's what they're needing now. And
Yep.
I think I know the level of intern that you are. And it goes back to that sort of principle of like the first couple internships or first while at least, you're going to be a glorified cleaner and it's being
Yep.
comfortable with that and
Mm-hmm.
it's accepting it and enjoying it, like well,
Mm-hmm.
even if you don't, just enjoy the process because there is still something to learn in that,
Yeah.
right? Because like if you start cleaning, you clean the dumbbell pit or you clean the racks or you clean the truck, whatever it is,
Yep.
if you do that to your best ability, the coach will see it and the coach will give you other tasks because
Yep.
you can handle those tasks. So then you're not just cleaning, but now you're maybe assigning little things for yourself or the athletes or the coaches or the
Mm-hmm.
other interns. If you do that really well and apply the same principles, oh, now maybe you're getting to take return to play or special groups or
Mm-hmm.
an individualized session. Oh, you're really good at that. Now maybe you can lead the defensive team or the offensive team. Or you're
Yep.
really good at that. Now you can implement some programming adaptations for them. Like
Yep.
it's going from that very minuscule step to be like, okay, I'm going to apply myself as hard as you can to then be able to program. Because like that's again in a team setting in a big environment, that's your end goal is to be able to make
Yep.
these changes and program and have the say on what happens. But you also have to know
Mm-hmm.
you started at the bottom and you had to work yourself there.
Yeah, of course, right? It goes back to that old quote, right? That I had to remind myself of when I started this job is if it's worth doing, it's
Hmm.
worth doing well. Not just scrapping it, not just scrapping a day because it was a bad day or because they did something, right? It's like no, like if you're gonna do this, if you're gonna embark on this journey and this process, do every single step well along the way. And odds are by the end, you'll end up doing and achieving more than you originally thought you could. Right. And that goes your way of like working up the rungs to eventually doing something that in your eyes you think is more impactful. Right.
Mm,
Like kind of what I ended with UW is I was very involved with their RTP program. So kind of making sure there's harmony between the athletic trainers, the PTs, the doctors, and like the strength and conditioning department so that we're not double dipping and making sure that guys are kind of on track and on progress with their rehab or whatever have you, right? But I started by making sure the dumbbells were all facing the right way, making sure the weight room was set up and broken down properly every day. That tedious task of wiping every single little bit of chalk off the side of the rack, making sure all of the plates are, kind of square and
comes up.
symmetrical.
Yeah.
That's how it started.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And like because I know the system that was there, like I can see where you started and where you ended up. And even like when I was there, like I was able to take the return to play guys and their
Mm-hmm.
coach band, but like it's something that we had to be really comfortable and good at the shitty jobs.
Yeah.
Like it's not finishing a session and like speaking to everyone else and then cleaning. It's like
Mm-hmm.
getting everything done quick so we can then enjoy ourselves. Um, and saying that, when we were in the lobby and we were first sort of talking, you mentioned wickets in terms of running.
Mm-hmm.
Now, I've heard that a couple times, but I'm
Mm-hmm.
not 100% sure what it is. And because I know that's your speciality, I kind of want to get your take on it and how to sort of, what is it, how to set it up, how to do it, and anything else that might be important information to sort of add that into your program.
Yeah. Oh shoot, where do I start? Well, first off, wickets are an amazing tool. Essentially, what it is it's just a mini hurdle, right? I think a standard hurdle, you can only lower them to like it's 27 or 30 inches. A wicket is like a 6 to 9 inch hurdle off the ground, very, very small.
Mm.
And depending on how you space them, you can space them for acceleration patterning or max velocity or even spacing patterning. And more than anything, that's what it is. It's a patterning tool to help ensure proper mechanics based on an external stimulus, right? So, for example, if we get a kid whose their stride length naturally is really long, but I think they're overstriding, meaning their foot is striking out, excuse me, excuse me, meaning their foot is striking out in front of their shin, their heel striking, rolling onto their toe, center of mass is shifting, they're cycling on the backside, and then big reaching forward to step down. One thing I might do is place my wickets in a condensed format and tell them to put their feet down underneath their hips. So if you see a wicket, you're not going to want to hit it because you'll trip and fall and you'll stumble. That external stimulus or feedback will kind of help push them into proper mechanics. Whereas if I didn't have those wickets or external feedback, I just say like, hey, strike underneath your hip, strike underneath your hip, strike underneath your hip. If they're not getting it, a
Mm.
wicket is a wonderful tool to help ensure that. Now, as great as wickets are, it's really difficult in a team setting to meet everybody where
Mm.
they're at, right? Because you have all sorts of different heights and leg lengths and torso lengths and acceleration patterns and step patterns. So, like, oftentimes when we do wickets, we set up all 8 lanes.
Okay.
It's all 8 lanes. So, like, lane one, might be a foot and a half spacing between them. So that either if you have issues producing enough power or if you're a shorter individual, you're probably going to slide into lane one. Lane eight, we might have 4 foot spacing. So for my taller athletes or my athletes who, are their rate of force development is really high, they understand my veterans, they might be in lane eight. And then from there, it's the eye test. If I see that someone is reaching and they're kind of barely getting over the hurdles in between, I'll say, like, hey, Jerry, knock down one. Like, go from lane 3 to lane 2. And then
Mm.
again, watch how they go through there. And then, or like, hey, you look really good. You look real choppy. You don't look, again, this is the eye test thing, right? The goal is smooth. Slow is smooth,
Mhm.
smooth is fast, right? So I want you to look smooth going through these wickets. So if you're really choppy, I might say like, hey, bump up one, go from lane 5 to lane 6, and let's see how we do. And then kind of this is where rep ranges and stuff kind of play a role in my programming, where we might have a day where it's wickets only, and we're going to go 7 to potentially 15 reps at kind of based on your fatigue level, your conditioning level. Again, eye test, is everything high quality? If it's not, cut it, scrap it, move on to the next one. I don't have time for suboptimal reps within my program. Now, granted, we have our days too, though. We
Mhm.
have our days where I'm gonna be like, listen, this is gonna be hard, but this is what you need. And kind of balancing that with having high quality is always a super fun challenge. But going back to wickets, very, very versatile. There's ways to kind of help meet kids where they're at. But if anything, it's an external tool to help ensure and kind of make concrete proper technique.
Mhm.
Because proper technique, right, there's a lot to be said about that. A, it's injury prevention. B, it's neural patterning. And then C, there's progression and regression within that. So, for example, kind of one thing that I've done this year is we haven't done it, or one thing that I've planned for this year is we're not doing acceleration wickets. We did that last year. And so that's just kind of acceleration wickets is quote unquote progressive spacing, right? Because, each step, if you're applying more force as your momentum builds, right, each step is going to be longer until eventually you get to even spacing, right? Kind of, and that's like way further down the track. This year, I'm really only using wickets for max velocity because
Mhm.
A, it's easier to implement as a team, and B, it's fun. Kids love the wicket day, right? And I always have a punishment. If you mess up my wicket, if you step on a wicket, if you break one, you got 20 push-ups, right? and it's just kind of a fun game to play where everyone calls out everyone for kind of if you're not doing the drill right. So now granted, later on in the year, once my group gets smaller, because track and field by nature is a survive and advance type team, so once the team size cuts down a little bit and we get to our league, district, and state meet, then at that point I'll have some data from their previous races in the year, and I'll be able to set up acceleration wickets based on the body of work that they've done.
With the spacing, I know it's kind of progressive, and obviously you've got the horizontal, vertical max,
Mm-hmm.
speed considerations. How how are you starting them? Because obviously, if you're starting them on a 3 point stance or a rolling start, the first couple steps are going to be shorter than when they're in their stride. How is that sort of
Mm-hmm.
set up?
Yeah, so the at least the wicket chart that I was given from Coach Ford and Coach Ben Dalton at Baylor, so there it's a time sheet. It's
Okay.
like if a kid runs 12 seconds in their 100, this is what like acceleration or progressive spacing looks like. Then this is what constant spacing looks like. And oftentimes, at least at the high school level, I will never have them run a wicket at faster than what they've already ran.
Okay.
So for example, like week of the state meet, let's say I got a couple 100-meter kids that have qualified and they're running like 10-6. I might give them wicket spacing of 10-8 or 10-9 that day for practice because I want them to hit it. It's really, really hard to replicate competition settings
Hmm.
in
Hmm.
practice, and also, I don't want that to mess with their mental capacity. At least my seniors and the ones who've kind of been through this program, they'll ask me what the spacing is for the day. And I'll say, oh, this is like 11-5 spacing or 11-3 or whatever. Later in the year, I don't tell them. And I say, listen, I'm
Hmm.
going to meet you where you're at today. Obviously, it's not going to be competition level intensity, but the goal is smooth. The goal always is and forever will be during wickets to look smooth as you go through.
Hmm.
Um, did that answer your question?
Yes. I'm still like, so how far off the starting line are the wickets starting?
Oh, setup. Yeah, yeah, yeah. It so my chart, we do a 6-step run in. And one thing we do is
Okay.
we take athletic tape and we will put tape on the ground. And then
Mm.
eventually kind of your first steps are always progressive because you're accelerating.
Hmm.
And we start from a 2-point stance.
Okay.
So we'll do a 2-point stance, and one thing I'll do is like if this is a line between two lanes, I'll put a set of blocks here, and I'll put both of the foot pedals up at the front, and then we do essentially a 2-foot stance, but 1-foot push out of the blocks.
Okay.
And then from there, they have 6 pieces of tape to hit with their feet, and
Hmm.
that should set them up for the spacing of the wickets as it goes.
Okay.
So that's another piece of the eye test, right? If I see a kid in lane 7 and they're constantly hitting behind the tape, and then they're having to eventually that leads to reaching for the wickets, I'm gonna say, hey, knock down one or knock down two. So there's always a visual goal or an external stimulus for them to be, I hate the word reaching, but for them to try to achieve.
Hmm.
Because the goal in acceleration is never to reach, because that leads to blown hamstrings and poor mechanics and shin splints. But there's yeah, so kind of we have 6 pieces of tape. It ends up being 8 pieces of tape with the first two directly in the middle of the wickets. So
Okay.
I'm like, hey, like if you're hitting your tape, you're good. Like you're good. And then once we get up, if we're choppy, then I might be like, okay, like move up one, push a little harder, right? Now we're talking about the intent factor. Like, all right, like you're
Hmm.
kind of good, but like what was your intensity here? On top of that, there also might be some days where we're doing tempo work, and often tempo work and technique, they're synonymous, right? Tempo work is just submaximal running, usually with the goal of kind of restoration, recovery to flush the system because we did something high intensity the day before. But I will put the wickets at the time spacing for that tempo of that day as a
Hmm.
primer. So, for example, if my guys are doing, 200s at 30 seconds, I might have them do like 4 to 5 by eventually, like we'll extend it out to 40 meters of wickets, but it's only at 15-second spacing. So the
Okay.
goal is sub maximal intensity, but absolute perfection with technique. And then to translate that to now we take the wickets away, it's easy to get lazy with our form when we're not running with maximum intensity. But generally speaking, kind of like the 6 steps, that takes you out to 10 to 15 meters, again,
Okay.
depending on how intense those wickets are. And then eventually wickets do get to even spacing at the end.
Mm-hmm.
So kind of the soft spot, or kind of the distance that where it starts to get even, is roughly 30 meters, right? But if you have spacing of like 6'6" at even spacing versus another lane's at 4'6", that might not get to 30 meters. So often, like we like to do wickets in 40 meters, and it's, hey, run through your wickets, but carry that rhythm through the cones that are 10,
Okay.
15, 12 meters past the end. So it's kind of like our first little bit. We're like, we got, these are tape steps, and then there's 2 steps within the wickets. Wickets might be progressive spacing from here to here, and then even spacing here to here, and then here's the cone. And there's no wickets in this part, if that makes
Okay.
sense.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. So the goal is to, again, you're hoping to achieve your max velocity during that 30 to 50, and then maintaining from
Mm-hmm.
50 to hundreds. Is
Yep.
that is that sort of, so the wickets, by the time you get to 30, 40, it's even
Mm-hmm.
space, because then it's like a maintenance thing after that, like
Yeah.
maintaining that pace. Okay.
Exactly. So kind of depending on what literature read, who you subscribe to, and what you believe, maximum velocity is reached at a different time. High schoolers, it tends to be earlier than pros, because max velocity is a direct product of how long and how hard you're able to
Hmm.
push down and into the track.
That
So
then that's also on capacity building and um
mhm.
how conditioned you are to be able to do that.
Yes, exactly.
Yeah,
Yep. Hmm. Yeah.
yeah,
So I guess for a better term, I guess our wickets are all we're kind of always, or the front half is almost always progressive, but it's a matter of if I want to put the wickets out there for the progressive spacing or not.
mhm,
Sometimes we might do like a 25-meter run in, and then their last 15 are over wickets that are only even spaced, right?
okay,
So because I'm not so worried about the push on that day as I am the even spacing, and they might stutter into it a little bit, but at the end of the day, if they are going through the wickets with optimal technique, that's the piece of the drill that I care about,
mhm,
right? It's kind of like, what do you want to get out of this drill? What do you want this drill to do for you? On max V days, again, or on max velocity technique days, I'll always start them with reduced spacing so that they're not having to maximally push
yeah,
from the jump, right? So, and yeah, there's variability there, and some kids might stutter into it, but the one thing that I don't want is a stutter then reach. If they do that, I'm gonna
mhm,
tell them knock down, right? Knock down. And we will still have kind of pieces of tape there, but it's all about kind of sliding the kid into the lane where they're going to get the most out of it. And then how long
yeah,
can they stay there before it starts to look crappy?
mhm. So it's
Yeah.
kind of going back to what we were talking about and making sure that they're at the right level for where they're needing to go.
Yes. Yep.
Yeah,
And
that's
then
sick.
kind of what level do you want to hit that day? Right? If it's a
Mhm,
true max velocity day where we're like we're going to do some flies at
mhm,
practice, we we might do the full wickets with acceleration spacing from the jump. Like
okay,
from a true like get down low 2-point stance. Whereas if it's a tempo day and it's more, but I still want to get the technique work in at the front end, we might not put the first 6 or 7 wickets out. And then we're going to have them start at even spacing, but the even spacing is less because the intensity isn't as much. And that's going to
mhm,
be to help prep them for the tempo of whatever we're running that day,
yeah,
right? So kind of they're a very, very versatile tool. It takes a long time to set up. That's probably the biggest thing as to why we don't do it. I wish we could do it more, but I just don't have the time to kind of get out there and
mhm,
get all 8 lanes set up pre-practice. But on days that we can, we do. You know,
yeah,
I truly and honestly believe that you can always apply. You could do wickets every day, every single day, and that would be a great way to kind of proper technique. I think it's a wonderful external stimulus tool. But on the back end, it becomes more of a logistics thing of
Mm.
how can I, like, where does it fit into my program, and what do I want to get out of it for that day?
And I think you've also like talked about the sort of age ranges you get
Mm-hmm.
with how you're sort of having to adapt these coaching cues and these coaching instructions. How is that sort of varied from your past experience to now having to have the younger and that breadth of people now coming in to that program?
Yeah, I've definitely I've had to grow my toolbox of analogies and metaphors that I use. I'm working with kids from, 14 to 19 now, at the high school level. So, and it's also depends on like where they're coming from. I get some really elite 14-year-olds where I can give them kind of the cues that I like and I prefer, and they're going to get it. But, and those are the cues that my veterans tend to respond to better. But it's kind of being able to go back to my toolbox, and how do I meet them where they're at? How do I describe this feeling that I want them to have during this drill? And then to have them consciously understand that, and then replicate that in a physical manner, right? That's always the challenge. But I've had to grow my analogy box. I've had to kind of, I guess, remember some old analogies. And that's one thing in my kind of reflection and refinement that I'm writing down too, is I'm like, hey, knee the window helps a
Mm,
ton with my young kids. So my cues during acceleration are split, push, punch. Shout out Coach BJ Dawson. You're splitting your arms, you're pushing off your front foot, and you're punching your back knee through. One thing yesterday when we were doing our hill runs was I felt like our punch was lacking. We were doing everything super well, but that back knee just wasn't coming through. So I'm telling them, punch the knee, punch the knee, punch the knee, punch the knee. They're just not getting it. So I told them this analogy. I'm like, hey, I want you to imagine there's a piece of glass in front of you, and you got to break it with your knee. You got to break it with your back knee. And then just like that, my young kids, like next 2 reps, looked absolutely phenomenal.
mm,
Right? So kind of learning how to speak their language and learning what cues work for them,
mm,
right? And how we can kind of keep refining that so that we can get every rep to look awesome.
yeah.
That's the goal, high quality.
Yeah, I've always liked to say that if a kid, athlete, or client isn't understanding what I'm speaking or saying, it's not their fault, it's mine. And it goes
Yep.
back to that ego thing where a lot of coaches be like, "No, you're stupid. You're not
Hmm.
doing it right," and you sort of beat that dead horse. But if you switch your perspective, like what you're talking about, it's like, okay, that cue isn't working. Let me see what else there
Hmm.
is to make them understand what I'm wanting them to do.
Yeah, and having the patience, right? Having the
Mm,
patience to do that, to kind of take a minute and say, no, like we're going to get this right, understanding that's going to set us up for success for everything else that we do. And one thing that I've kind of messed around with a little bit too is going back to using wickets. Some kids do better with internal cues, some
mhm,
kids do better with external cues. Now, I know in the strength and conditioning world specifically, the studies have shown that you get better performance with an external cue, right? What I've found, at least with my younger kids, so specifically like my freshmen, sophomores, or even my first year juniors, right? My first year seniors. Sometimes internal cues is how you get them hooked on that feeling,
mhm,
right? So one of my first year juniors, I told him yesterday, I'm like, hey man, there's no other way I can put this, but I need you to push down into the ground as hard and as fast as you can every single step through our 15 meters or whatever. And again, it took him 2 reps, then he was great. Just it started clicking. He was smoother, his
mhm,
coordination was better. He was actively gaining speed through that distance, which is our active definition of acceleration here. Whereas my freshmen, right, kids who had kind of, they have a younger training age, right? They're physically younger, so they haven't had as many years in their body coordinating these movements, right? I told them, knee the glass, knee the glass, knee the glass, knee the
Mm-hmm.
glass, do that every step. And that tend to work well. Some of my soccer girls, I tell them, kick the soccer ball with that. Because for them, like, right, they're very feet driven, right? Maybe not necessarily knee driven, but I'm like, hey, with that back foot, kick the soccer ball, but kick it with your
Yeah.
toe, not the front side. And then if we have proper setup mechanics, that knee's going to punch through first, but that back foot is their driver now.
Mm-hmm.
So again, kind of meeting kids where they're at and getting them to understand what you want out of the drill. And then that cue might stick with them forever, which is good.
Mm-hmm.
But
Yeah.
broadly speaking, split, push, punch are our goals. Now, how I teach that is going to vary group to group, person to person.
Yeah. I also don't, and again, this is part of a bigger rant from me, and it's coming out soon, I think. Um, Research is also not always a best indicator on what you need to do with your athletes or clients.
Mm-hmm.
Like, it's very controlled. All the variables are controlled. So there's,
Mm-hmm.
and it's also selected. You kind of have to select who you
Mm-hmm.
want and the people that fit into that box that you're looking into. So it's not necessarily fair, but then also is everything is normalized and then standardized,
Yep.
right? So everything is an average of an average.
Yes. Yeah.
So it's I agree that I get that research is a really good thing when we're getting principles and thought processes to
Mm-hmm.
then develop it into our own program and how we can apply it to what we are doing. But we also need to be careful with, okay, this actually has zero application, and that's okay.
Yeah.
But it's also
Yeah.
knowing, again, you're probably getting me started on one, Ryan. um but it's like, again, each coach, each individual athlete that is under them is going to need a different stimulus or different instruction method than
Yes.
what is normative to that age group.
Yes, right. And I think when it's funny you mentioned that, because one thing I kept coming back to yesterday was, what's the goal? Like, what is the true goal of this practice? Yes, the true goal of our practice was acceleration technique, acceleration, power, right? All that good stuff. But it's like kind of sub maximally, the goal that I wanted each and every one of them to do was to push for as long and as hard as they could for 15 meters. How
Mm,
do we achieve that, right? How do I as a coach elicit that intent via my communication to them, right? How what communication methods can I use with that group to get them to push as fast, as hard, and as long as they could for 15 meters running up a hill that was a 15% grade, right?
mm,
That was the true goal of that day. Yes, we label it as acceleration, but acceleration is pushing, right? So, for example, I had to take a handful of my freshman kids off to the side when we were like in between reps, and I had them do broad jumps.
mm,
I had them do broad jumps, right? A pushing and extension drill. Well, actually, we started with frog jumps, like hands on the ground in between your feet, push, and then I want your body in a straight line in the air.
mm,
Okay, so we did frog jumps on flat ground. Then I said, cool. Now we're going to do frog jumps on the hill. Still go straight up, straight down, but now they had to lean forward a little bit to
mhm,
compensate for the hill. I'm like, cool. Now frog jump up the hill, right? So then we did 1 rep. And I'm like, cool. Now I want you to do it continuously for 3 reps. So 3 frog jumps up the
mm,
hill with the goal of getting farther and farther each time. Cool. Now remember that feeling that you had with kind of like your ankles, your knees, and your hips? Copy that here.
yeah.
And actually, now that I'm thinking about it, I should have had them do a split stance frog jump, because that would have been a little more sport specific. But their reps kind of cleaned up after that, right? So
Mhm,
again, kind of having this toolbox of analogies, progressions, and regressions that you can pull from on the fly to kind of help meet kids where they're at, and then getting them to understand that because what you're doing or because how I talk to you is different is not a bad thing.
yep.
It's all for the good of you, right? Same thing with cutting reps, right? We had a rep range of 5 to 10 yesterday. I had a handful of freshmen. They looked like crap at 5. I'm like, dude, you're done. And it's not against, it's like, again, that's not bad for you. You just, you haven't demonstrated to me the proficiency in this movement to do more, because the last thing I want to do is bury you today knowing
Hmm.
what you have tomorrow.
Yep.
Right. So kind of building that trust, that camaraderie, that culture with the athletes of everything that I say and I do is for you. Right.
Hmm.
You are always my number one priority. You're at the top of my list. And that's not a bad thing. Less is more. Less is
Yep.
always more. And at
Yep.
least with my personal philosophy, right?
Hmm.
And kind of, I said this earlier, we'll have our days. We will have our days where I'm going to straight up tell you, hey, man, this is going to suck. You're
Hmm.
not going to want to do it. But the culture of our team, we are a championship culture, and we need to do hard things to try to win, to try to earn spots to get to state, because there's not a ton of them.
Hmm.
We have 207 kids on roster right now. 16 per event go to our league meet. So in
Yep.
our league meets, like 12 to 14 schools, right? So ideally, right, one school, if the math works out, one school will get one spot in each event. Well, unfortunately, that's not how it works. And then from the
Yep.
league meet, 5 make it to state. And then you got 3 rounds: quarter, semis, and finals, survive and advance. That is our end goal. So
Hmm.
what am I doing here on my acceleration day, cueing wise, drill wise? How is that going to get them here? And when the kids buy into the goal, they respond a lot better to this, especially when kids do get special treatment
Hmm.
of like, yep, okay, you're done at 5 reps, or like, hey, do this drill over here. I think you're going to get more out of it.
Yep. I also think having the confidence to do that is key in your programs.
Yeah, that, and I'll be honest, the confidence and humility of that is something that I had to grow into. But also, one thing that I learned early on was I hate watching my kids go through pain.
Mm.
I do not like that. If it's like if it's a crummy rep, if it's a subpar rep, if they're not doing it the right way, it took me 2 full years of coaching to finally be like, okay, some kids are going to have to get special treatment. That is what it is, but it comes from a place of love, right? It
Mm.
always stems from a place of them first,
Yep.
right? Because before, right, I was really rigid in my programming. I'm like, well, this is the workout. We're going to throw all these kids on the wall, and the great ones will stick, and everybody else, I need you to just rise up. Well, I ended up burying a lot of kids that way, and I'm not proud of it. So that's kind of one thing that I've had to learn to step into, specifically this year with the addition of the freshmen, is have a plan B, have a plan C. But the goal is the same. The
Hmm.
goal is to learn how to push and learn how to push hard. How do we do that? How do we achieve that goal? And then how do I communicate that to you in a way to where you're going to give me maximal intent for that goal of that day. It's a
Yeah.
wonderful science artsy blend that happens.
I think again, it's all coming from the progressive outlook that we have, and
Mm-hmm.
it's that thing where we're not comfortable staying still. We have to chase that next uncomfortable step, but we know
Mm-hmm.
that there's growth at the back end.
Yes.
Like it's another question and sort of hardship in coaches is like everyone wants everything quick, but how do we tell them it's not going to be quick? You will have to be in it for a while, and it's consistency, and then you will get it.
Yeah. Right. So, and I think a big piece of that also is patience.
Mm.
Patience. I've had to slow down a lot, both here at Pro Club with my Gen Pop people, right? Because kind of, to be honest, college S&C is easy. They have the intent. The goal is to win championships, and a vast majority of them have come from good high school developmental programs where
Mm.
they kind of know how to
That's
work in
enough
a weight
already.
room.
Yeah.
So all we got to worry about is how they do it, right? They kind of like they know what to do. Technically, they're really sound. It's how they do it. But here and at the high school level, I got to backtrack a little bit, right? I got
Hmm.
to shift my frame of mind of they don't know what they don't know, and how do I express what I need them to understand in a way that's not demeaning, not putting them down, and ultimately what's best for them as a
Hmm.
coach. So I've had to set my ego aside many, many times these past 2 years and really get in that mindset of it's the kid first, it's
Hmm.
the athlete first at all times.
It's what we've also always said. We're playing chess while other people are playing checkers.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you, Ryan, for coming on. I know you're a little bit pushed for time today.
Oh
Um,
yeah, no. Thank you for
but
having me, man. It's a
it's
pleasure.
all good. Again, coming from episode 3, the first couple of episodes I picked were friends that I was somewhat comfortable with to be able to sort of expand and begin this journey. So having you back on is always great, and I look forward to more as well. If you let everyone know where they can reach you and sort of ask further questions as well.
Yeah, probably Instagram's the best way, or at least that's the social media that I'm on the most. It's just at and then kind of my name down here in the bottom left, no spaces, just at Ryan Croson. Um, yeah, I'm obviously available, willing and available to talk, chat, create some dialogue, answer any questions, probably hopefully ask a couple good questions too. But yeah, appreciate you having me on. I'll see you in another 80 episodes? Is that what it is? That's what we'll do.
It's kind of 80, yeah, yeah. That's what we do.
Yeah. Yeah.
I appreciate you. Peace.